Okay, so get this. We're talking about a potential 4 to 6 degrees Celsius temperature rise by the year 2200.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Wild stuff.
Yeah.
Imagine, like, that beach house in Florida that everybody wants, totally underwater. That's what the sources are saying could happen.
Yeah, totally.
So, before I start prepping for, like, a full-on apocalypse, let's try to figure out what exactly is driving this crazy heat wave, and what would a future that hot even, like, look like for humans?
Yeah, for sure.
We've got a bunch of different sources here, like projections, analyses of all those top greenhouse gas emitters. Oh, and even this, kind of a wild comparison involving atomic bombs.
Oh, wow. That's intense. Yeah, the projections are, they paint a pretty bleak picture, I'd say. One source even uses the words significantly unsustainable. And trust me, that's putting it lightly.
Significantly unsustainable.
Right.
Yeah, doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, does it? What does that actually look like in our, like, day-to-day lives, though?
Yeah. Right, yeah. Okay, so think of it like this. Some regions, especially, the ones closer to the equator, could get so incredibly hot that they basically become uninhabitable. Like, imagine going outside.
Yeah.
And it's so hot you can't even work, let alone, like, do anything enjoyable.
Yeah.
And on top of that, all that extra heat messes with rainfall, too.
Yeah.
You have some places seeing these, like, crazy, intense floods, while other places completely dry out. It's like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about, how important stable weather is for, growing food.
Right, yeah. So it's not just about, like, cranking up the AC, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about entire ways of life being completely, like, upended.
Totally.
And we're not just passively floating towards this either.
Yeah.
There are specific actions, or inactions, I guess you could say, that are pushing us in this direction.
Yeah.
And our sources point to 3 main culprits, I guess you could call them: China, the U.S., and the European Union.
Right. Kind of like a podium.
And responsibility, I guess, for global emissions.
Yeah, not so glamorous podium for sure. So China's in the lead, mainly because of their booming industry and their reliance on coal.
Yeah.
Then you get the U.S., who, they're making some efforts to clean up their act, but they still hold the record for, like, the most emissions throughout history. And that's thanks in part to, their
Yep.
large population.
Yeah.
And their pretty energy-hungry lifestyles.
Yeah.
And then the EU, they're somewhere in between, making progress on renewables, but still with a pretty hefty carbon footprint.
Okay, so it's not just one, like, bad guy here, but if these big players, right, if they know what's at stake, why haven't they, like, gone all in on cutting emission? We're talking about the fate of the planet, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reasons are pretty complex and also interconnected. Economically, there's a lot of fear that going green too quickly will hurt those industries that are still dependent on fossil fuels. Think about it. Let's say you're a car manufacturer.
Right.
And you're, deeply invested in those combustion engines. Shifting to electric vehicles would require a massive overhaul, right? And potentially even lead to job losses. I mean, no one wants to be the first one to jump.
Yeah.
Especially if it means, like, losing your competitive edge.
Right, so it's this, like, short-term economic fear, even though we're kind of staring down the barrel of, like, long-term devastation. What else is what else is holding us back?
Well, there's also the political aspect. Trying to get everyone on the same page. All the different political parties.
Yeah.
Industries. Even everyday people. It's kind of like herding cats.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own priorities. And that can lead to some pretty weak policies. Or even complete gridlock. I mean, just look at past climate negotiations, right? They often get so bogged down in all these disagreements. And they end up producing these, like, watered-down compromises that don't really move the needle.
It's so frustrating. It's like everyone agrees there's a fire, but no one wants to be the one to, like, throw water on it. Because, what if it hurts their hand a little?
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's that whole issue of developing countries. I've heard arguments that they shouldn't be held to the same standards as, like, those of us who've already gone through our industrial revolutions, Like, they need a chance to catch up, even if it means more emissions in the short term.
Yeah, it's a tricky ethical dilemma, for sure.
Right.
On the one hand, they deserve the chance to, improve their economies and their living standards. But then on the other hand, it creates this uneven playing field where some countries are shouldering way more of the responsibility than others.
Right, yeah.
And then, of course, there's the influence of the fossil fuel industry.
Right, of course.
They've got a huge stake in keeping things as they are.
Yeah.
They've been known to, lobby against regulations, and they even fund research that tries to downplay climate change and promote all these alternative narratives.
Right. So it's like a counter campaign just to like muddy the waters and delay action. I mean, it makes you wonder if there's any hope at all.
Well, before we spiral into despair, there's another way to think about this. One that really uh, drives home the urgency of the situation.
You mean that crazy comparison to atomic bombs?
Exactly. One of our sources claims that a 1 degree Celsius temperature rise is like multiple atomic bombs exploding every single second.
Hold on. So you're not saying the planet's going to like literally explode?
No explosions. It's about the amount of heat energy being trapped in the Earth's system, which is comparable to that level of destructive force. Think of it like this. All that heat from burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and other human activities has to go somewhere, right? And the biggest sponge for all that heat is the oceans.
Okay, so the oceans are like this giant buffer, just absorbing all this excess energy.
Exactly. They're doing us a huge favor. But even the oceans have their limits. If we keep pumping heat into the system, it's going to have serious consequences for marine life, sea levels, and weather patterns.
Okay, so we've got this, this tricky trio pumping out emissions, this whole tangle of economic and political roadblocks, and this heat energy that's building up like a ticking time bomb. It's a lot to take in. Where do we even go from here?
Well, the good news is that understanding the problem is the first step towards finding solutions. And there are solutions out there. They might not be easy, but they're definitely worth exploring. In part 2, we're going to dive into those potential solutions and see what a world where we actually take action might look like.
Okay, sounds good. So before we jump into those potential solutions, we were painting a pretty bleak picture, I'd say, of a world that's on track for like a 4 to 6 degree temperature rise. It's hard not to, get a little freaked out by all this. What's like the absolute worst case scenario we're looking at here? Okay, well, imagine it's 2150 and those summer trips to Spain everyone loves. Yeah, they're a thing of the past, large parts of the planet, especially around the equator, They become so hot that they're practically uninhabitable. Yeah. And we're not just talking like uncomfortable. We're talking dangerously hot.
Right.
Like outdoor work becomes impossible. Yeah. And even staying inside is a struggle with, strained power grids and limited access to cooling.
So it's like the planet's a giant oven, and some places are just getting like burnt to a crisp.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy. And remember, we were talking about all that extra energy messing with rainfall.
Yeah.
We could see some areas getting hit with these like intense floods, while other places experience these devastating droughts. Imagine entire agricultural regions just drying up. No more wheat, rice, corn. That's a global food crisis waiting to happen.
Right, so it's like a double whammy. Too much water where you don't want it, and not enough where you desperately need it. And I'm guessing those rising sea levels we talked about earlier aren't going to help matters either.
No, definitely not. Coastal communities and island nations are going to be hit hard. Picture this. You're living in a coastal city, and over the course of a few decades, the water just keeps creeping closer and closer. Eventually, entire neighborhoods are underwater, forcing millions of people to abandon their homes and relocate.
Yeah, I've seen those projections where entire cities, even countries, are completely submerged. It's mind-boggling. We're not talking about a few flooded basements here. We're talking about mass migrations on a scale we've never seen before.
Exactly. Millions of people fleeing from flooded homes, scorching deserts, and regions where crops just can't grow anymore. It's a recipe for social and political instability, with everyone competing for resources. Could lead to conflicts and humanitarian crises.
So basically, the business as usual scenario. It's just this domino effect of interconnected disasters, each one making the others even worse until the whole system just starts to crumble. It's heavy stuff. Tell me there's a way out of this mess.
There is. While the consequences of inaction are, pretty dire, the potential for positive change is also very real. We still have time to avoid the worst case scenario and steer towards a more sustainable future.
Okay, that's the glimmer of hope I was looking for. So let's flip the script. What happens if we actually get our act together? What does a future where we take sufficient action look like?
Okay, so imagine a world where instead of rising by 4 to 6 degrees, global temperature is stabilized below 2 degrees Celsius. But to get there, we'd need a rapid and complete shift away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy sources.
Okay, so instead of that oven analogy, it's more like we turn down the heat a bit and let things simmer at a more manageable temperature.
Exactly. We'd see cleaner air, healthier ecosystems, and a more stable climate overall, Picture cities powered by solar and wind energy with, efficient public transportation systems that reduce our reliance on cars. Imagine restored landscapes with forests and wetlands acting as these natural carbon sinks, helping to, regulate the climate.
Okay, yeah. That's a much more appealing picture for sure. But what about those economic concerns we were talking about? Won't shifting to like a green economy just tank the economy? People are worried about losing jobs, higher prices. Is it even realistic to expect people to, go along with these changes?
It's not about tanking the economy. It's about transforming it. A lot of experts argue that going green will actually create new jobs and boost economic growth. Think about it.
Yeah.
Investing in renewable energy efficiency, and sustainable infrastructure, that would stimulate innovation and create entire new industries. I mean, the green energy sector is already booming, and it's only going to grow as we move toward a more sustainable future.
So it's not a choice between a healthy planet or a healthy economy. We can have both.
Exactly. A healthy planet is the foundation for a healthy economy, and vice versa. But you're right. People are definitely worried about the transition. And honestly, addressing climate change does require a bit of a shift in our thinking. We need to move away from this short-term thinking and embrace a more sustainable long-term perspective.
It's like we're so used to instant gratification that we've forgotten how to plan for the future.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But the good news is that this shift in thinking, it's already starting to happen. We're seeing a growing awareness of climate change, especially among younger generations. They get it. They understand the urgency. And they're demanding action from leaders.
Okay, that's encouraging. But I'm guessing there's still going to be pushback from those who benefit from the status quo?
Well, of course. Change is never easy, especially when it disrupts, established power structures and economic interests.
Yeah.
But the momentum is building, and the costs of inaction are becoming more and more clear. It's battle for the future, really. A battle between those clinging to the past and those fighting for a sustainable tomorrow.
And the outcome of that battle depends on the choices we make today, individually and collectively. Heavy stuff. We've explored both catastrophic and transformative possibilities, and it's clear that the path we choose will impact, generations to come. All right, so we're back for our final deep dive into this heated future. We've covered a lot of ground, right? The science, the stakes, the potential for disaster, but also, the possibility of a brighter future. It's easy to get lost in the big picture stuff, though. So let's zoom in a bit. What can we, as everyday people, what can we actually do in the face of this, this global challenge?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's easy to feel overwhelmed and wonder if our individual actions even make a dent. But think about it this way: collective action. It's built on millions of individual choices happening every single day.
So you're saying we shouldn't underestimate the power of individual action? Okay, I'm listening, but I need specifics. What can people actually do to shrink their carbon footprint and, contribute to a more sustainable world?
All right, well, let's start with those everyday choices, the ones that might seem small, but they really add up big time. Take transportation, for example. Could you walk, bike, or take public transit more often instead of, automatically hopping in your car?
I've actually been trying to bike to work more often. It's a great exercise, and I feel a little less guilty about my weekend road trips.
There you go. Every little bit counts.
Yeah.
And then there's energy consumption at home.
Yeah.
Think about switching to energy efficient appliances, using LED light bulbs, being mindful of your heating and cooling.
Right. It's not about living in the dark or freezing ourselves, just being a little more conscious of, how much energy we're using.
Exactly. And here's one that's close to my heart. Food. Choosing a more plant-based diet, or at least cutting back on meat, can really shrink your carbon footprint. Animal agriculture is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases. So making more sustainable food choices is a really powerful way to make a difference.
Yeah, I tried going vegetarian for a month last year, and I have to admit, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed experimenting with new recipes and ingredients. It's not as difficult as people think. But okay, so we got transportation, home energy, and food. Are there any other areas where we can, make a difference?
Absolutely. Be a conscious consumer. Think about the products you're buying
and
the companies you're supporting. Look for brands that prioritize sustainability and ethical sourcing. And here's a big one. Buy less stuff. Embrace a more minimalist lifestyle.
So voting with our wallets, basically. Supporting businesses that align with our values. Yeah, I'm definitely trying to be more mindful of that these days.
It makes a difference. And don't forget about the power of your voice. Talk to your friends and family about climate change. Support policies that promote sustainability. And hold your elected officials accountable for their actions.
So it's not just about changing our own habits, it's about, like, influencing the system as a whole.
Exactly. Our individual actions ripple outwards. We're all interconnected.
Okay, I'm feeling a little more empowered now. It's not about feeling helpless in the face of this, this giant problem. It's about taking ownership and making a difference where we can.
That's the spirit. And here's a final thought. Imagine a world where everyone embraced this mindset. Millions of people making conscious choices to live more sustainably.
Okay, yeah. Paint me that picture. What does that world look like?
It's a world where cities are designed for people, not cars. Think green spaces, clean air, efficient public transportation. Renewable energy powers our homes and businesses, and our food systems are localized and sustainable. We consume mindfully, minimize waste, and truly value resources.
That sounds pretty amazing, actually. A world where we've turned down the heat and things are just simmering along nicely.
It's a vision that's entirely within our reach. The future isn't, predetermined. It's shaped by the choices we make, both as individuals and as a global community.
That's a great note to end on. This deep dive has taken us through some pretty heavy stuff, but ultimately, it's a story about hope and action. We have the power to change course and create a future that's sustainable and thriving.
I couldn't agree more. The challenges are real, but so are the solutions. It's time to step up, make conscious choices, and be the change we want to see.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into a heated future. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Take what you've learned, share it with others, and let's keep working together to create a cooler, brighter future for everyone.